Wes Goldberg, cold open question of the day for you. Very easy one. Who's your MVP at this point of the season?
Oh, I don't know that that is an easy one. Because I think some of the teams that we associated with having an MVP uh, aren't struggling necessarily. Like in the case of the Dallas Mavericks, like Luka was an MVP favorite. The Mavericks are just sort of middling right now. The Oklahoma City Thunder, of course, are at the top of the NBA. But I don't know that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has played at an MVP level necessarily. Anthony Davis for the Lakers is leading the league in scoring. I would have to probably go with Jason Tatum, honestly. That team, the
Yeah.
Celtics are 6-1. Tatum's averaging 30 points, 7.5 rebounds, 5 assists per game. He's awesome. Um, from a 3-point shooting perspective, it's been after a really hot start to the season, obviously. Not so hot as of the last couple of games here, but he's just doing everything for a Boston Celtics team that's rolling and has actually been without Jaylen Brown for a couple of games here, and it hasn't stopped them. So I'd probably go with Tatum. What about you?
I think it's Tatum 1. I think and then it gets into some conglomeration so far of AD, Devin Booker, Shea, and Anthony Davis.
And you know what? Honestly, Jokic needs to be in this conversation. He's averaging 30, 12, and 10.
I know.
For
I just
a
the
Denver
Nuggets
team
just
that got, I know, but they're 3-3 now. They've won a couple. They've won 2 or 3 in a row. The numbers speak for themselves, and so if you're making a long list with 6 or 7 guys, Jokic has to be a part of it.
He's also in advanced stats don't mean a ton as of right now, but he is just the leader in all the advanced stats and things. Donovan Mitchell, I think, deserves a shout on that long list as well. He's been awesome for the 1A team I think in the East so far this year. But we'll check into this every so often throughout the year. Not maybe as easy as I thought, Wes. But on today's show, we're gonna do something new here: optimism meter. And then we're going to do a panic meter. We're going to 3 teams in each category, and we're going to order them and see who should be the most optimistic based on what we've seen so far and who should be panicking the most. That's coming up today on the Just Basketball Show.
Oh, a spectacular move by Michael Jordan. Oh, LeBron James with no regard for human life.
What is up, everyone? Chris Manning here with Wes Goldberg. We are the Just Basketball Show. Please follow, rate, review on your podcast app platform of choice. Hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel. And check us out on TikTok, Instagram, and X, where you can find more content and all of that great stuff. But Wes, you're going to tell everyone about our friends at BetMGM.
That I am. Support for today's episode comes from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use the bonus code JustBasketball. And you're going to get up to $1,500 in a first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using the code JustBasketball. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 years or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply.
Also want to tell you about our friends at Homage. Homage is the ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, figures, and traditions across sports, music, and popular culture. Use our link below. Support the Just Basketball Show. One item they have hot right now if you're an NBA fan is their NBA starter pullovers. They have some amazing teams in this, including the Cavs, the Lakers, the Bulls. They have the Celtics, the Bucks, the Sixers, the Knicks, and these great starter pullovers. I myself am eyeing the Cavs one. It's just a great looking pullover. It's great for this time of year. I'm going to throw up a photo of this right now. If you're watching on YouTube, you can go get the link. But I mean, that's a classic vintage looking starter jacket from our friends at Homage. You can go check that out. It's a great looking piece, and use that link below. Support Just Basketball Show. Wes, let's go to optimism first. We're going to be optimistic to start here. Despite the way this episode is titled, I definitely titled it about panic, but I want to start with optimism and start with hope. 3 teams we have here in the optimism meter: the Cavs, the Warriors, and the Atlanta Hawks are where we have put in these. How do we? So this we should negotiate this in real time. Do we want to make the case for each and then decide? Do we want to each one? How do we want to do this?
Yeah, let's go little elevator pitch, case for each, maybe a long elevator ride, pitch for each, and then make a decision on which one should be the tops on this made-up optimism meter.
Hey, it's scientific. I use proprietary technology, which is in my brain. Let's do the Warriors first because I think they are an unexpected surprise in some ways in this West. Because number one, they're fourth in net rating right now, despite Steph Curry. I think missing 3 games so far. They're 5-1. They're second in defense. They're 11th in offense. They're number 1 against the spread if you're into the gambling side of it, according to Clean of the Glass. And they're getting good minutes from a guy named Andrew Wiggins, who there's a big ESPN story about him right now that kind of dives into, I think, some of his struggles. But he looks awesome compared to where we saw him since really the title, to me. It feels like, Wes. It feels like this the best version of Wiggins in the 4 games he's played. Feels like it's they're shooting, an unsustainable but very hot 56% from 3. Some of the underlying stuff with him in terms of his shooting, I'm curious to see where it breaks. His 2s would be a pretty low percentage at where they're at right now. But he's shooting well from 3. He looks engaged on defense. He's playing like the kind of Andrew Wiggins that can help this team be the best version of himself. And that is something, to me, West, Andrew Wiggins playing like this is a surprise and a reason to be more excited about them when Steph does come back if it holds up.
The one stat I always look at with Andrew Wiggins is rebounding. When he's engaged, when he cares, he's a difference maker as a rebounder. He's averaging 2 offensive rebounds a game right now, which would be a career high. 5.8, which is the highest he's had in a Warriors uniform, but reflects a little bit of that great run that he had going into the 2022 finals in the playoffs, where he was just like this amazing ace rebounder for them, creating these extra possessions, all these things, doing the little things that, quite frankly, Andrew Wiggins has not done. If there's a knock on Andrew Wiggins' game, is that he doesn't do any of those little things, right? He's sort of just an empty calories scorer, especially during his time in Minnesota. So when he's doing that, that's the most engaged and most impactful version of Andrew Wiggins. Moreover, for the Warriors overall, like I was a little, I liked the roster. I liked the roster more because I thought it was setting themselves up for maybe another big move down the line, which certainly is still the case. But
yes.
I did have questions about, okay, cool, that's a lot of depth. I'm not as big of a depth guy as most people, I think. I think, sometimes too much depth could be a little bit of a problem, and I thought the Warriors were flirting with that issue a little bit. They have 12 or 13 guys that they're going to want to play on a nightly basis, but credit to Steve Kerr, man. He has figured it out. They're still playing 12 guys every single night. Even with Steph Curry going down, they're 3-0 now in the games that Steph has missed. And a lot of that is because of, to your point, Andrew Wiggins. Jonathan Kuminga embracing this role coming off the bench over these last 3 games. He's been awesome, averaging about 18 points per game. His true shooting numbers are off the charts. And then Buddy Hield can't miss a 3-pointer, right? And so, what was it? Some other coach, some opposing coach said it's Klay Thompson all over again, is how they're using him. And so, I might not go that far, but certainly within these first few games, it's looked like that, right? You can't disagree with that. So, Steve Kerr has nailed it. A lot of these guys are playing really well. I think if you're a Warriors fan, you've got to be really optimistic about what this group is. And there's going to be tougher times ahead, a point that I'll make here in a second. But, there's enough options here that they could toggle through. Like once Buddy Hield sort of cools down, because this is how shooting averages work, there's going to be a week where he can't hit anything, right? Well, okay, that's okay. They still have D'Anthony Melton. They still have Brandon Podziemski. They still got Moses Moody. They still have Andrew Wiggins. They still have all these other options that they can go to. And that Steve Kerr, if he's got his thumb on the pulse of this team the right way, the way that he has now, quite frankly, then there's going to be a lot of ways to sort of get over these hurdles as they come by toggling through some of these different options that they have. So, yeah, I think you can't be anything other than optimistic if you're a Warriors fan.
The rotation part is really interesting to note just because I think it feels to me in watching around the league, and I haven't gone back and looked at this, but it feels like more teams right now, Wes, are playing like 11, 12 guys just to like keep minutes under check a little bit right now, which I think is an interesting trend. I think if that's actually what's happening, I'm not just seeing that in a couple spots and projecting at it. I think there's something interesting there. It would be kind of, I think, a pretty organic response to the pace and space era and just guys seemingly picking up more knocks with more minutes and more intense play. There is something, I think, to just 12 guys in the regular season. It makes it harder to some degree to know who your 8 are on the back end but it's a trade-off you make, I think, for health that I do kind of like. Their defense, West, to me, is the thing that would make me the most optimistic because they're second in defense in corner the clean of the glass. And it's as good as I can remember them playing defense in the last couple of years. It looks just incredibly dialed. I mean, Draymond, he got a tech on opening night, but that guy looks like incredibly revved up for this year. Steve Kerr had this interesting quote before they beat the Rockets on Saturday, and he said, quote, the number one thing in defense is always personnel. Scheme is overrated. What I would say is our guys, number one, we're able to better stay in front of the ball. Because of that, we're not having to get into rotations. We're putting ourselves in better shape each possession. Guys are playing really hard, and our defensive coaches are doing a great job. It's simple for him to say that, and there's probably like a little bit more in the scheme than he's maybe acknowledging there. But I think the way that they are just kind of engaged, and then to your point about Wiggins with the rebound, another point about the rebounding, like that tells you that this Warriors team is bought in. And like that Rockets win was a win that was fueled by their defense really doing enough to give them room to get out on the break and score the other way. Like it was a defensive first performance. And, the offense, I think at the peak of the Curry Warriors has been what has driven everything. But people, I think, maybe forget before Durant gets there, those teams had really sound defense. And it wasn't just the offense. It was a very sharp tactical defense led by Andrew Bogut at the back and Iguodala that really fueled that team up the ladder.
Even when Durant got there, right? Like this team was always top 3 in defensive rating. I thought it was the most underrated part of their team was that they would get stops, they would create turnovers, and then you've got the Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Splash Brothers thing happening in transition. That was the scariest part about that Warriors team is when they were doing all that stuff in the full court, not necessarily in the half court. But look at up and down this roster. I think Steve Kerr's got a great point where I do think scheme is a little overrated defensively, right? Like you can smoke some mirrors your way to a pretty decent, okay defense, right? But if you're not getting the buy-in from the guys on what it is that you're trying to execute in the first place, and I don't know that scheme factors for like know the personnel, right? Like just playing smart defense. That to me isn't even scheme. To me, I think about scheme. It's like, okay, are we switching? Are we coming up to the level? Are we playing some zone? How are we handling these switches? Like that to me is the scheme stuff. But if you're getting effort across the board, it does sort of erase the importance of scheme. And you look at this roster that they assembled, it's a lot of guys that want to prove themselves, right? It's young guys like Moses Moody, Podziemski, Jonathan Kuminga, guys who know that if they're going to make it in this league and if they're going to stay on this Warriors team and not get traded before February, they're going to have to give it all defensively. Even a guy like Buddy Hield, DeAnthony Melton, these guys who have been a little bit like journeymen, they kind of get into their first year here, and I think they're bought in defensively. Gary Payton II being healthy should not be overlooked in terms of their defensive viability here.
Absolutely.
And then obviously Andrew Wiggins having the bounce back year that we talked about. And Draymond looks great, by the way. He does. He looks legitimately fantastic. So all that stuff is true. I will, if I could put a little bit of, if I could take some of the wind out of the defensive sails here for the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, please.
They've played 5 different teams this season. They played 2 games against the New Orleans Pelicans, Portland, Utah, the Clippers, and the Rockets. Not exactly a murderer's row of top offenses. All of those teams, in fact, rank in the bottom 11 in offensive rating. They haven't been tested, not even a little bit defensively. Like, not even a little bit defensively here. They needed to come back from 31 points to beat the Houston Rockets in overtime. This November 4th, Monday night, we're recording this a couple hours before it. They play the Washington Wizards. Again, not going to be tested. But the 3 games following that are on the road.
Yeah.
That's going to tell us what this Warriors team is all about. At Boston, at Cleveland, at Oklahoma City. And then they get back home for Dallas and Memphis in the middle of the month. So these next 3 to 5 games, they're going to tell us a little bit more. They're going to give us a little bit more of an indication of where this Warriors defense is.
Yeah, I think it's a good place. The Kuminga thing remains a very interesting thing to watch, but you get to that road trip and to a team I think we can go to next, Cleveland. Like, you played well defensively in that game. That'll tell us something because, Wes, the Cleveland Cavaliers to me look like a championship contender so far.
Is that our next team?
I think we'll go there. We can get to Atlanta last. I think we'll go geographically. We're gonna try to do this correctly in terms of a flight path. I think the Cavs have hit everything. They've done everything you could have wanted for them to do under Kenny Atkinson. They look really composed. They look really engaged. the way they're playing, there's two little changes I've shouted out here before, I think, on the show, but they're relocating guys off the ball, particularly Darius Garland, better to get him better looks. And they're playing with, like, every coach says pace and tempo. We're going to play with that, and it leads to success. In their case, it's actually true. They're not just letting Mitchell and Garland bring up the ball at and get over the half court line with 16 seconds to go. You're getting, Isaac Kahor brings the ball off a rebound. Evan Mobley brings the ball up a rebound. Even Garland and Mitchell are moving up the court, so their sets are starting at 21 seconds or 20 seconds. Those 4 to 5 seconds make a huge difference in terms of you actually getting a quality shot. That those seconds matter. Wes, they've just, I think, blown everything out of the water so far. And the way they beat the Bucks on Saturday. Dame gets really hot early, puts the Bucks up 9-0. Cavs end up winning by 1 on a Mitchell game winner, but like after that initial burst, they just outplayed the Bucks it felt like for the most part of the game. When they took a punch, they were able to give a couple back. This team just looks rock solid across the board. The vibes are really good. There's something there. I don't think they are going to ultimately be able to maybe knock off Boston in the big picture. But I think if I'm making the case for them here, I think they're better than expected, and I think there's a very good chance this team, and I think I would put them there now. They're in that New York. I mean, they beat the Knicks in New York, but they're in that Knicks, that second tier of teams in the East that we think of as real competitors to Boston. They're in that tier, I think,
now. There's no doubt, right? I mean, this is the thing I always said about the Cleveland Cavaliers. Say what you will about the fit, and the fit concerns certainly were real, but there wasn't a starting 5 in the Eastern Conference before this year, before obviously Paul George joining Philadelphia, that could rival the talent level that the Boston Celtics have outside of Cleveland, right? Like, they just had so much talent. Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen. Those are all guys who have made All-Star games, or we think will make the All-Star games in the case of Evan Mobley. They are super talented, super deep. Karis LeVert coming off the bench. I mean, their talent was never the issue there. It was always the fit. And Kenny Atkinson, to your point, has done a really good job of figuring out how to make these pieces fit. They're second in offensive rating right now. That's crazy. And they're still very good defensively, but they're second in offensive rating. Now, some of it is the fact that they're shooting over 40% from three-point range. That's going to come down. They're not going to be a 40% three-point shooting team. Like, guys like Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, like these guys are good three-point shooters, but Karis LeVert what's he shooting, like 55% or something from three-point range? Like, he can't miss.
It's the Karis LeVert under Kenny Atkinson is just a different NBA player than he is under any.
Yeah, maybe it won't. Maybe
coach.
It won't change then. Yeah, maybe I'm being premature on this, but I do think a lot of these guys, a lot of this stuff will come down. But even if they level out somewhere around 36%, that's still going to be really good for this team and exactly what they need. And the other thing that's a big change offensively from last year to this year. This team now ranks second in drives per game in the NBA. They're averaging almost 8 or 9 drives more per game than they did last season. Small sample size, sure, but you can even see watching this team, there's definitely more of an initiative in terms of, okay, let's just drive to the basket. It felt like last year there was a lot of swing around the perimeter or settle for a jump shot, and it was either going to be Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland, somebody like that doing that. This year, it feels a lot more intentional. Drive to the basket, kick out to whoever the open shooter is. And even something as small as that, doing it consistently, does tend to evaporate some of the fit concerns, right? Like, that's still a winning formula, is have a guy like Donovan Mitchell drive to the basket, and if he's kicking out to Darius Garland's a really good catch-and-shoot shooter. Now, all of a sudden, that fit issue becomes a lot less of a fit issue. And Darius Garland is an awesome passer who isn't like the physical driver that Darius Garland or that Donovan Mitchell is, but is cunning and crafty and can find his way in the paint pretty easily. And when he's doing it and kicking it out to Donovan Mitchell, all of a sudden that fit looks a lot better, doesn't it? And so I think that's been a big part of it. And then obviously Evan Mobley just basically being used as a completely different player this year. He's a big part of them driving. He'll get the ball in the triple threat position and puncture the defense. His growth has probably been the most important part of Cleveland's start here in terms of why they're here now and also projecting forward. So if you're getting all of this from the Cavaliers, I love their game against the Milwaukee Bucks the other night. You've got Jarrett Allen playing as well as he's played in a couple of years. He's guarding Giannis. You've got Evan Mobley guarding Giannis. You've got Evan Mobley stopping Giannis at the basket. And then you just got a bunch of guys who can make shots doing what they do. So I think the formula is working, and I think we do have to reconsider where the Cavaliers are in the pecking order in the Eastern Conference right now.
The Evan Mobley leap is happening. I think that's absolutely there. The way Atkinson is getting more out of him is pretty eye-opening. The other thing, Wes, I'll say that we can get to Atlanta. The win against the Magic last week was kind of a bummer because I wanted to see full strength Orlando with Paolo Banchero in that game. Didn't happen.
Yep.
Paolo has the torn oblique. But the Cavs basically made the Magic get into like one-note offense for most of that game. And there was points where the Magic made some shots. Jalen Suggs played a ton on ball. But there was a lot of possessions where it was just Jalen Suggs attacking or Franz Wagner attacking. They kind of... Some of this is on the Magic as well because it just always starts with what are you actually doing as an offense? What is your plan? At least to me. But the Cavs were just defending them in these one-note situations. And if you can dial a team's offense down to one note, you're probably going to win those games. And they have the capability to do that even against, I think, really good teams. It gets harder the further you go up the league. Like, it's very hard to do that against Boston, especially if they're hitting threes. It's hard to do that against this version of New York. I think that's why Towns is such an interesting fit there once they figure that out. But they can still do that. Like, the offense is better. That was the thing that needed to improve. But on the other side, that defense is still going to be absolutely elite when it matters. And I really cannot wait to see that team play the Celtics. Important that those regular season games are going to be NBA Cup games, West. So we're added stakes.
Yeah, I guess.
Between Boston. I was saying that in jest.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Last thing on Cleveland, it still feels like Donovan Mitchell can even play better.
Yes. He's taken a noticeable, not a step back in terms of quality, but a step back in terms of I'm dictating everything. It felt very much like he is feeding into the ecosystem.
Yep.
And then will go off when he needs to.
I think part of that is having the contract. Part of that, he's like, yep, I proved myself. I'm here. I'm good. I got the deal that I want. You're absolutely right. His usage is certainly down, and it feels like there's just going to be games where he pops off, and I feel like we have an exact... He had the game winner against Milwaukee the other night, obviously, but in terms of a full, popping off Donovan Mitchell, 60 points or something, maybe not 60 points, but still feels like that's in the cards for Cleveland at some point soon.
Yes. All right, let's get to Atlanta. Wes, where are you at on the Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Zachary Shea, Quinn Snyder Hawks?
So, we talked about the Warriors and the Cavs, and we got into a lot of the particulars with them in terms of their rotation, some of the X's and O's changes, some of all that kind of stuff. This is more of vibes optimism, right?
It is. It's fully vibes optimism.
Because there's you can look at it and really puncture your own argument pretty quickly, right? They won their first 2 games of the year against Brooklyn and Charlotte, and they lost 4 straight. Oklahoma City got beaten by the Wizards twice in a home-and-home series, which is not good. And then you lose to Sacramento. They did get a nice win in New Orleans on Sunday night, but that was a Pelicans team without most of their important players. So you look at the schedule and you're like, all right, still haven't beaten even close to what a good team would be in the NBA. But that said, the vibes are awesome in Atlanta. And this is even dating back to the preseason, some of the moves that they've made since the DeJounte Murray trade. Trae Young is as good as he's ever been. He's playing great. The assists, the passing, everything, he's still very much in control of that offense. Jalen Johnson is exactly as advertised, right? He was having a career year last year, gets injured for the season, comes back, doesn't miss a beat. He's tied his career high, or he set his career high last week with 29 points and then tied it again on Sunday with 29 points with a near triple-double. So this guy is doing everything. Defensively, he's exactly what they wanted him to be. Zachary Shea, who I have been very critical of in terms of a number 1 pick, has shut me up really quick. He's not been awesome necessarily. Defensively, there's still some concerns there, but he looks great in terms of just what a fit is and what he projects to be going forward. But beyond all of that, I really want to talk about Dyson Daniels, who's the guy that they traded DeJounte Murray for. And this dude has been lights out. He is leading the league in deflections. He has been an on-ball pest. He has been easily, to me, the most impressive on-ball defender in terms of guards in the NBA through these first couple of weeks of the season. He's a leader to me, early leader to be all defensive team this season. And you're getting basically, you traded DeJounte Murray for Dyson Daniels and Larry Nance Jr., who's given them good minutes off the bench. I think the Hawks have won the trade. And I think part of that is unfair because DeJounte Murray obviously hasn't played since fracturing his hand, and we don't know when he's going to come back. But for the Pelicans. But even that, isn't this what you sort of wanted from DeJounte Murray when you traded for him in the first place? Is this guy who could be a 2-way player. Now, Dyson Daniels is certainly more of a one-way player on the defensive end, but he can make shots every once in a while offensively. But he's a really good counterbalance to the finesse of Trae Young. Dyson Daniels is just a physical MFer who gets into your grill and doesn't give any quarter. And him picking up guys full court and being the defensive player he is has completely changed the tone in Atlanta, especially on that defensive end. I think he's given them exactly what he's sort of like their version of Josh Hart for the New York Knicks. It's just a guy who's going to come in, muck things up, drag you into the mud when you don't want to be. Where everything else is fine, but wherever Dyson Daniels is standing is quicksand, and you don't want to be near him. And I love that in terms of an element that this Hawks team just did not have. So that's my long Dyson Daniels thing. It's all vibes right now in Atlanta. I still got to see him beat a good team at some point. They play the Boston Celtics Monday night. Then it's New York Wednesday night. So they got a tougher schedule coming up. Maybe they look awful in those games, but I think you really got to like what this direction of the Hawks is heading in.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, the fact that I agreed with this pick, even though like they lost 4 in a row just till they beat the Pelicans. They're an under 500 team with weirdly the same record as the Nets and the Wizards, because early season NBA has been it can be a funky place sometimes. Although Jordi Fernandez is doing a very nice job with that Brooklyn offense. I think they got that high right. It feels like. Mm-hmm. They're sick. The Hawks are 6th in offense. Their defense is 25th. If their defense ultimately gets better and the offense sustains at this level, and I think it can because Trae Young historically is a path to like a pretty darn good offense on his own, this team's going to be more competitive than we thought. This team is going to be, if there's injuries in the East, like they have an opportunity to strike, but it'll be about, I think, finding two-way balance. But I think you're right, Wes. Like they traded in the DeMurray trade was always kind of trading for a guy who used to be a really good defender and great on-ball defender and trying to put that genie back in the bottle a little bit instead of a guy who played with the ball more in his hands and wanted to be more expansive on offense. That's maybe not the best way to go with Trae Young. Now it's in a Quinn Snyder setting, just very centered around what Trae is. And that's a throwback to how this team made the Eastern Conference Finals. This team is not making the Eastern Conference Finals this year, but the identity around Trae now makes, I think, a little bit more sense than it did the last couple of years. And that's leading to some, I think, functional good vibes basketball from them.
Yep.
So let's. How do we want to? What's your order of who should be the most optimistic here? All optimistic, but who's your winner?
It's got to be Cleveland. It's got to be Cleveland. They've beaten good teams. They look great. The talent is there. And then I would probably go Warriors after that, and then Hawks after that.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
It could be the Warriors. Let's see how they fare this week.
If they were doing this with Steph, I would be like, "Yep." They're like, and they could like you could then extrapolate like an argument that this team is on the path to being actually more of a title contender than we thought or something. But we need to see this with Steph, even though we kind of know what it's going to look like.
And he's questionable for Monday night. Again, we're recording this only a couple hours before the game starts, so he's. It sounds like he'll be back soon, which is just another reason for optimism for them. But yeah, the Cavs, you gotta love what you're seeing from them. That's a team that, based on what we've seen in the early part of the season, we're reconsidering where they are in the Eastern Conference standings, and it feels like with all these other teams that we already talked about, we still need to see a little bit more.
Yes. All right, let's go into our panic meter, which got some teams that should be feeling rough right now. But first, got to tell you about our friends at eBay. eBay has been a fantastic partner of our podcast network, the Just Sports Network, this year, partnering with Just Baseball on 3 incredible events from spring training to the All-Star Game to Wild Card Weekend. And we want to shout out their new Game Time Gets collection, along with the career benchmarks, league-wide records, and single-game achievements that will trigger them to drop, with bidding at each card starting at just 24 cents as an homage to the game's 24-second shot off. If you go to that ebay.com/GameTimeGets, great milestones pending. Luka Doncic's first triple-double of the season. That is just going to happen at some point. Zach LaVine scoring 30 in a game when he's back from injury is absolutely one. Donovan Mitchell, 35 points in a game. That's going to happen at some point. There are all these things you can root for and stay up to date on the cards that you are going to want. So check out ebay.com and go to ebay.com/GameTimeGets. Wes, only one place I think to start with the panic meter, and that's with the Philadelphia 76ers. I think we have to start here, and I think we have to start just with what is one of the 2 big NBA news stories of the last couple of days. The other one, unfortunately, Greg Popovich being away from the Spurs right now. Best wishes to Pop. I don't think it's right for us to comment until we really know what's actually going on there, but best wishes to Greg Popovich. Joel Embiid, to some degree, had an altercation with a reporter. The details on that, we've seen conflicting things from different people. in different ways. His official statement is that he struck him but didn't punch him, is what I believe happened. The column was, Wes, I'll say this. I'm not going to sit here and condone Joel Embiid being physical with a reporter over something he wrote. I don't love that. But I also read the column and get why he was super pissed and wanted to kill this guy. Because I thought the column was pretty cheap, candidly. I thought what the guy wrote was really cheap, so I get why he's mad. The whole thing is just a mess for a team that hasn't had him yet play this year and is just having Paul George again a couple hours after we record this. Paul George will play his first game. But nothing has gone right for Philly so far. Nothing.
No, they're 1-4. Have not seen Joel Embiid and Paul George on the court together yet, which was a bad way to even start this season. And look, you mentioned the Joel Embiid thing here, right? The column was scathing and unneedingly personal. I think it'd be a fair way to assess that. And then Joel Embiid's response probably wasn't the best way to handle that. And this is just a simple case of two wrongs don't make a right, And the NBA has launched an investigation into Joel Embiid. It sounds like Daryl Morey and everybody is going to probably levy some sort of disciplinary action on this if they're going to try to handle this internally a little bit, which I think is probably the right move. But look, we got here going into the season talking about, I remember having this conversation with you specifically, how it felt like the drama was done in Philadelphia. It was, you re-signed Joel Embiid, you got Tyrese Maxey on the extension, you gave Paul George the big contract. All these guys are under contract now. There's no weird trade drama, roster issues hanging over this team. You know who your coach is and Nick Nurse. It just felt like finally we were moving past this crazy dramatic tenure that has been post-process. And within the first 2 weeks of the season, we have two different investigations, all centered around the star player, right? With Joel Embiid in terms of his comments about, the maintenance on the knee and how he's not going to be playing in back-to-backs, not just this season, but for the rest of his career, which is a big no-no when it comes to the NBA and their TV partners. And then you've got this issue with a columnist. And again, Joel Embiid has not even played in a game yet. And so this is bad vibes, right? Where we talked about good vibes with the Atlanta Hawks. These are bad vibes. And this is not necessarily the what you want to have going on when Paul George comes back and then when eventually Joel Embiid comes back. And there's a lot of questions going on with the knee. This is really just maintenance? The guy hasn't played in 2 weeks? This is maintenance? What kind of maintenance is this? The team is 1-4.
Yeah, if he just said he was still hurt because he played through a knee injury last year when he maybe didn't, it wasn't the best choice, and he just needs more time to recover, I would just appreciate, I don't understand the reason to not just say that if that's the truth. And that feels like what is going on here.
And it might just be, hey, we don't want to cause the panic. But hey, I mean, this isn't better.
This is making it worse. I think NBA teams generally, and not just Philly, I think NBA teams freak way too much about wording of injuries for whatever weird. Maybe it's competitive advantage, whatever. They don't want to panic people and whatever it is. I just think, to be honest with people, they're going to respect it more, and this is one of those cases for sure.
100%. And so, yeah, the vibes are bad around Philadelphia. The Joel Embiid situation is not good, and all these moves that were meant to prop open this window. If Joel Embiid is more injured than what the organization is letting on, then maybe this window isn't open at all. Because as good as Paul George and Tyrese Maxey might be, they ain't opening a championship window. You need Joel Embiid. And you need Joel Embiid to be one of the best 5 players on the planet for this all to work, right? Again, other reasons for panic here. Caleb Martin, Kelly Oubre Jr., Eric Gordon, these guys that they picked up haven't been awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
All these guys are not shooting well and all these things. And part of this, and I would argue most of this, is they're just overtaxed, right? They're being asked to do too much while the star players are out, and we'll see what it looks like. Even if you just add a Paul George into the mix and still don't have Joel Embiid, that alleviates a lot of what these guys have to do. That's now 2 guys who can create their shot between Maxey and Paul George, and maybe everything falls into place after that. But Andre Drummond is a quality enough backup where you can still sort of hover above water there. But yeah, this is not good. And the more time Joel Embiid misses, and this is always my issue with the maintenance program, is, hey, that sounds cool. You still got to win games. You still have to win games. I know everybody thinks the Eastern Conference is a cakewalk, but the Eastern Conference has a very clear top sort of part of the conference, and you're 1-4 right now with a tough stretch coming up against Phoenix, both LA teams. You've got New York coming up on the schedule, Cleveland, Orlando, Miami, all this before Thanksgiving. this could get really bad really quick to a point where even when Joel Embiid is playing, and again, we don't think he's going to be playing every single game, and even when he does come back, climbing out of this hole becomes a lot harder, right? Like, we're only 2 weeks into the season, but we're already 2 weeks into the season. And at some point, it has to feel like there's got to be some sort of urgency going on in Philadelphia, and right now, it doesn't feel like it's there.
The idea of keeping Embiid healthy this year was all about the fact that there was a high floor because of Paul George and Maxey and the supporting cast they built, and that Embiid would also be there to raise the ceiling of regular season. It does that logic to me, Wes, just doesn't work. Isn't going to work the same if, to your point, they're digging themselves a hole. Have the third worst net rating in the league right now. If they're just like deep in the hole, you're going to be chasing all year, and that is not where you want to be with someone like Joel Embiid who has the injury issues. And you don't want to ask. You want to ask just you have a fine line with him of how much you really want to push him. I think to get the most out of him late in the playoffs. You might not even have that case here, which is just an incredibly bleak possibility here. So tough stuff for Philly. Let's go to Milwaukee next. Boy, they needed that Cleveland game was a great win for Cleveland. The Bucks needed that game in the worst way, and they, in a lot of ways, let that slip out of their hands. But this team, West, just feels everything just feels off there. Nothing feels like, aside from Giannis and Dame occasionally getting really, really hot, there's nothing else on that team that I liked in a real sustainable way watching them for on Saturday night.
Giannis's stats are still Giannis-like. He's still playing on an MVP level, even given the stats. And maybe I'm being unfair here, but when I'm watching the Milwaukee Bucks, I still don't feel that oomph from him or them. Right? I criticized Giannis for not setting the right tone last week, and I still felt that with the games over the weekend. It's, yeah, man, you could score 30 points, you can have the 12 rebounds, whatever. It's just, it doesn't feel like the same physicality from Giannis. And look, the Bucks are a mess. They are a mess. They're 1-5 right now. There's no organization. There's no plan. Poor coaching. Bad personnel. And honestly, it feels like it's over. It feels like it's over from Milwaukee. Because if you even are getting these kinds of contributions and performances from Giannis and Damian Lillard, and you still can't even win, against a good Cleveland Cavaliers team, that's one thing. But you're getting blown out by Memphis. You're getting played off the court by Boston. You're losing to Brooklyn and Chicago. You haven't won since opening night against the Philadelphia 76ers team that we just discussed is in its own state of panic. Like, what is going on with that team? And I couldn't help but watch that Cleveland Cavaliers game, and just some of the stuff that was going on in that fourth quarter. I rewatched it this afternoon, Chris, and I'm like, this was worse than I thought it was even at the time. The personnel decisions by Doc Rivers don't make any sense. Defensively, they're all over the place. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing defensively. Offensively, it feels like they just set screens for the sake of setting screens, and they don't know what to do after. Like, how many times do they play? They do the most obvious thing, which is the Cavs had somebody, Wade or Merrill or whoever it would be, covering, like, defending Taurean Prince. And so, okay, Giannis or Damian Lillard would call up Taurean Prince. Hey, set my screen. Let me get switched onto your guy. Easy enough, right? Like, that's basketball 101. And then what would happen? Nothing. They would just stand around with poor spacing and just let Evan Mobley or whoever get back onto the guy that he was guarding in the first place. And the whole point, and you just wasted 4, 5, 6 seconds trying to force this switch that you never forced. And then you just end up playing in the same matchups you had 6 seconds ago in the shot clock. And now you have to have these, like, panic shots. And luckily, Damian Lillard's going off, and so you're able to hang in this game. But they had no business hanging in that game in terms of what their execution level was at. And then defensively at the end of that game, in the most important shot of the game, Donovan Mitchell makes the game winner. Why is Gary Trent Jr. still on the floor? You had a timeout. Why wouldn't DeLon Wright be on the court at that moment? Who's your best perimeter defender? It's just little things that they're not doing. And you could have all the talent. You can have Damian Lillard and Giannis. But if you're not executing and you're not doing the little things, it is hard to win in the NBA. And it feels like not only have the Milwaukee Bucks taken that fact for granted, it's as if they don't even care. And that's the worst part. Is it just sort of, we're watching this and it just feels like it's over and nobody cares about it. And that we're just sort of waiting for this thing to get blown up, which would be pretty remarkable considering that it wasn't that long ago that Giannis won the championship. It really wasn't that long ago that the Milwaukee Bucks were hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy. That was 2021. Like,
And he signed
that's
this extension, which
crazy.
felt like the window was wide open then because you got Giannis in his prime to sign an extension. It's tough, man. Like they're not getting like anything from any of the role guys. Or like Trent has been rough. Torian Prince is like all these guys are kind of exactly who you know they are, and they're fine on cheap, but they should be like another layer down,
Yep.
and they're just
DeLon
not.
Wright's not shooting. Teams are just leaving him open. He's averaging 2 shots a game. That's crazy.
You can't do that when you're like the second most important bench guy on the team. It's like they're throwing Andre Jackson out there. He's trying, but it's not really giving them anything in a two-way sense. There is not like solutions here, Wes, to me. Like I don't know what the solutions are, which is the part that scares me. Like Philly, if we're looking at this,
is I think most teams in this situation would just say, we're still waiting for one of our best players to come back. We still haven't played a minute with Chris Middleton on the court. They're not even saying that. They're not even saying there's full recognition in Milwaukee, and it would be inaccurate for them to say that, by the way. But it would just be an easy excuse that you hear a lot of teams sort of go to, especially a Doc Rivers led team who tend to find excuses wherever they can get them, and they're not even going that direction, and that's kind of the freaky part to me.
Well, then it's like you get like Pat Connaughton's giving you nothing, right? It's like a guy that was like key for your title thing a couple years ago is now just like a nothing basketball player, and that's however that's happened is brutal. But it's like you can tell stories about teams that are struggling right now and say, oh, they're going to get better in this way or that way. Even if Middleton comes back, I just don't even know if I believe he's going to be healthy enough or at that same level that's really even going to make a difference. And it's like, what are we doing here?
Yep, he looked good in the playoffs, but I mean, if he's a 16-game player, that's fine, but that's not what Milwaukee needs anymore.
No,
they can't afford him to be that.
They can't.
So
they can't be the 6th seed and then like expect to figure it out. Like they can't.
No,
they can't.
And that looks like, and that's a great call out because that looks like what their destiny is going to be. Is hey, we just avoided the play-in tournament, or maybe they're in the play-in tournament, and they're trying to pull a Miami Heat from the last couple of years, and they don't have the personnel nor the coaching to pull that off. And by the way, Giannis has not finished a playoff series in 2 years now. That's also been an issue for him. Speaking of Giannis, there's a lot of reports that a lot of executives around the league are looking at Giannis as maybe the next guy who could force his way out of his current situation. And I think that's a lot of hopeful thinking by rival front offices, but that's the thinking nonetheless. I've got some Giannis trades if you want to hear them.
All right, let's do it.
First one I have is the Brooklyn Nets. Ben Simmons' expiring contract.
I'm already sad.
Zaire Williams for salary matching purposes. And they've got some first-round picks that they can move. They've got their own 2025 first-round pick, which looks like it's going to be very valuable. And if you're Brooklyn, you could say, Cooper Flag or Giannis, right? A chance at Cooper Flag or Giannis. And then they also own Milwaukee's 2025 first, which is looking increasingly valuable at this moment. So basically, you're making the deal for those 2 first-round picks and to reset your cap after this year when Ben Simmons' contract comes off the books. There's that. Thoughts?
Say no to that because I don't think it actually gets Brooklyn cannot. I just do not want the Brooklyn Nets to do the thing that you could do, but it's like shotgun yourself into needing to win again by trading for Giannis. I think they need to just keep sticking with whatever they're doing right now.
I think that's probably the right thing because you've got Giannis, Nick Claxton, Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, Dennis Schroeder, Cam Thomas. I mean, it's not a bad roster, but it's definitely not winning.
It's not competing with Boston or Cleveland or the Knicks or Orlando or any of these teams.
The other team that everybody's pointing to is the Houston Rockets. You could basically just put Dylan Brooks, Steven Adams in the trade to make the salaries work, and then whatever youth draft picks, they have all of it. So if you're Milwaukee, are you interested in somebody like Jalen Green? I don't know. Alperen Sengun, would Houston move off of that? I don't know.
Yeah, I think
to me, it's like you've got Amen Thompson there. You've got Tari Eason. You've got Reed, the kid they just drafted. Like, there's a lot there that you could pick from, and then all the picks. So that's an obvious thing.
I would like Houston, especially if you could do it. If you could find a way to make it like a non-Alperen Sengun young guy category, I'm more in on that because I think Sengun and Giannis together is just that could be absolutely beautiful on both ends of the floor.
Golden State, that one's another. They're going to be calling if Giannis. They were really interested in trying to get Giannis before he signed this last extension. I think they would be all in on it again. This is if you're not putting Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, Pods, the first round picks, all of it in a deal for Larry Markkinen or Paul George, you're definitely doing it for Giannis. So I think the Warriors would go all in Giannis, and that would be really intriguing. But still, like, Kuminga's interesting. Pods is interesting. Moody's kind of fun. I don't know that there's like a blue chip thing coming back to me if I'm Milwaukee that I feel awesome about. I don't know that Kuminga quite rises to that level just yet. Now, maybe by February we're thinking a little bit different, but if just talking about what we know right now, I still don't love that if I'm the Milwaukee Bucks, but it's better than some of these other offers.
I think prediction without any knowledge, just a hunch. I think if he does ever get traded, he's going to end up with the Warriors. Just a feeling.
Okay, I've got two more for you.
Okay.
The Oklahoma City Thunder. Would you trade Jalen Williams, Lou Dort, and just like a bunch of stuff, salaries,
Yeah,
to get up to, and then the first round picks, whatever it costs?
I think I might. Because like, who's beating Shea, SGA? Who's beating Shea and Giannis and Chet?
Right, and they would still have all this depth and plenty of picks.
And yeah,
Like, it would almost not cost them anything. You could even trade Hartenstein if it gets past. If I think it would be within the new year, and Hartenstein would be trade eligible. You could do Hartenstein, Jalen Williams, Isaiah Joe, and then you could put 10 first-round picks in the deal. It wouldn't matter. It doesn't cost. You don't need those if you're Oklahoma City anymore. So there's that one. And then the last one that I thought was kind of fun but kind of useless for both teams. New Orleans, they trade Zion Williamson, Jordan Hawkins, and some draft picks for Giannis.
We're shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic trade.
Yep.
What
if you're the Pelicans, you get the player that you kind of always wanted. And if you're the Bucks, you get a player that's sort of like the player that you already have, but you can't have anymore.
Yeah. That's a good transition, Wes, to the New Orleans Pelicans, our last team on the panic meter. We're going to hit them quickly here. Obviously, just big season for Zion. Michael Pina wrote a really great piece about this, The Ringer, this week. Murray's been hurt. The Ingram thing is still hanging over their heads. They just have not been that convincing as of yet. They're 26th in net rating, 22nd in offense, 26th in defense. I was a little bit more bullish on them than you were coming into the year, and I feel like an idiot for thinking that.
Well, I don't think you should, because this is more of an injury issue, right? This is more of just a year from hell. Oh my God, I can't believe all this is going wrong already. Zion missed the Sunday game with a hamstring injury, but that's not even the worst of it, right? Trey Murphy was out before the season even started. He's going to be out for another couple of weeks with a hamstring injury. DeJounte Murray is out indefinitely with this fractured left hand. CJ McCollum is going to be out for another 2 or 3 weeks. Herb Jones is out with a shoulder for another 2 to 4 weeks. Like, those are their most important players outside of Brandon Ingram. Yeah. And you mentioned that the Brandon Ingram thing is still hovering over their head. They can't even afford to trade that guy right now. He's their only source of offense, and he's actually been playing really well.
He has. His back's against the wall, and he's playing really good basketball. But like, he is what's keeping them afloat. He's hit that game winner, which was the moment of their season so far. He's shooting 42% from three, which would be a career best mark on pretty high volume, which is good to see.
Yeah, the volume is higher than it's ever been, which is an ideal fit with Zion. That's always been the issue with those two.
It's always been the issue. Is it real? I don't know. It's like one of those things. I never know what's real with the Pelicans, which is sort of the vortex you get in with this team in a lot of ways, which is scary. It's just like, Wes, this is where I come with it. The injury stuff, obviously, it's a season from hell stuff, but isn't this always what seemingly happens to the Pelicans?
Yep.
Isn't this like always what happens?
Yep. And that's why I couldn't buy them. Their over-under to me was a stay away. This team is always injured, it just feels like. And it's not just Zion. It feels like this team's dealing with injuries all the time. And I think that's a reason why Griffin wanted to shuffle the deck over the offseason, but just couldn't. Is because I think there was a recognition that, we're not quite stable enough the way that we want. When they have all their pieces, they're as dangerous as any team in the league, outside the sort of the top teams that we usually talk about. But they're not going to be healthy for at least a month here. So there's still plenty of time for them to turn this thing around. If Brandon Ingram and Zion are out there, they can carry this team to 500 or a little bit better even. I have no doubt in my mind that they can do that. But, I think they're on this panic meter list just because it's like, to deal with this many injuries right out the gate is bad juju. Like, that's you never want to deal with that, and they're dealing with it right now.
Yeah. So who's your panic meter leader, Wes?
Oh, it's the Milwaukee Bucks. No doubt about it. Like, I could still see a world where Philadelphia comes out of this whole thing and Joel Embiid is healthy, Paul George is on the court and healthy, and you've got the big three together and now they're rolling. Like, that's at least plausible. Where I'm watching the Milwaukee Bucks, they have their best players on the court, and it still looks terrible. And everything that's swirling in terms of the rumors and the noise. And trust me, it is not a media crafted thing. These Giannis trade rumors, this is very much happening around the league. This is something that front offices are talking about. This is something that league insiders are talking about. It doesn't mean it's real. I'm just telling you, it's not this media narrative that people are driving just to try to force Giannis out of Milwaukee. It is not that. This is something that is being talked about and has been talked about. And in fact, I would argue that the media ignored it for a very long time. This has been being talked about for a couple of years now. And so, yeah, it's hops of the panic meter. There is no team that should be panicking more than the Milwaukee Bucks right now.
No, these other teams, you can tell a story in your head about how it's going to get better, and I would believe them to varying degrees. I don't know how this Bucks situation is getting better. I have literally no idea how that's going to happen. Unless just the talent bet. I feel like, Wes, if the talent was going to be what dragged them out of it, it might have already happened, and it hasn't, and that scares the crap out of me.
Yeah, if you're this talented, you should still beat Brooklyn and Memphis and these other teams that you have more talent than.
You should have beat Cleveland at home, and considering how that game unfolded on Saturday, you absolutely should. Maybe they'll smack Cleveland and take the O off the Cavs as a couple hours after we record this, but I somewhat doubt.
Is Doc Rivers' job on the line, or is that almost like we can't go through another coach? Four coaches within a year is a lot.
I don't think they can do that again. It feels like they're on the Doc ship until it.
You know who's an assistant on that bench, right?
Yeah, Darvin Ham.
Yeah.
The Lakers Twitter's favorite
experience.
Yeah, who Lakers fans have glowing reviews of if you go online.
And
Only
Lakers
nice
players, even if you just listen to their press conferences.
Only nice things to say. Really tough stuff for the Milwaukee Bucks. Oh boy! All right, we'll be back later this week, coming to you on Thursday. Another round of takes, another round of insights, another round of everything going on in the world of basketball. Until then, I'm Chris Manning. That's Wes Goldberg. We'll talk to you soon.